Welcome to History Captured. We document what history tried to erase. Subscribe.
The war ended, but for many, it never truly stopped. This photograph was taken in the autumn of 1941 in a Soviet village west of Bryansk, shortly after German occupation. The village had been burned during a punitive operation. Such actions were carried out in response to suspected partisan activity. Most of the men had already been taken away or killed. Those left behind were women, children, and the elderly. By the end of 1941, thousands of villages across occupied Soviet territory had been destroyed in the same way. This image dates to the winter of 1941 to 1942 on the Eastern Front. German infantry units faced extreme cold without proper winter equipment. Many soldiers had summer uniforms and improvised protection against frost. Temperatures dropped below -30 degrees Celsius. Frostbite caused massive losses. That winter became one of the first signs that the German campaign in the East was failing. This photograph was taken in 1942 in occupied Ukraine. It shows Soviet prisoners of war captured during German operations. By this time, millions of Red Army soldiers had already been taken prisoner. Food was scarce. Medical care was almost non-existent. More than 3 million Soviet prisoners of war would die in German captivity during the war. Taken in early 1943, this image shows civilians returning to Stalingrad after the battle. The city had been almost completely destroyed. Water, electricity, and housing no longer existed. Families searched for relatives among the ruins. Many never found them. Stalingrad became a symbol not only of military victory, but of civilian suffering. This photograph was taken in the summer of 1944 in Belarus, after the area was liberated. Soviet soldiers stand near a mass grave discovered outside a village. Such burial sites were found across occupied territories. Entire communities had been unitstoted. Often, only traces remained. The scale of civilian losses became clear only after liberation. This photograph was taken during the winter of 1941 to 1942 in besieged Leningrad. The city had been completely cut off since September 1941. Food supplies were almost gone. Every day, civilians transported the dead themselves. Public transport no longer functioned. During the siege, more than 1 million civilians died, most of them from starvation and cold. This image was taken in 1942 in occupied Belarus. German occupation authorities regularly carried out village roundups. Civilians were gathered for forced labor, deportation, or execution. Often, entire villages disappeared in a single day. Women and children were not spared. Belarus lost more than a quarter of its population during the war. This photograph shows the aftermath of the Battle of Kursk in July 1943. It was the largest tank battle in history. Thousands of armored vehicles were destroyed in a matter of days. The German offensive failed. From this point on, the initiative on the Eastern Front shifted permanently. Kursk marked a decisive turning point of the war. This photograph was taken in 1944 after the liberation of a concentration camp in occupied Poland. Soviet troops discovered prisoners in extreme physical condition. Many were barely alive. The scale of systematic murder became visible only after liberation. Entire families had vanished. By the end of the war, millions had been killed in the camp system. This image was taken in May 1945 in Berlin. The war in Europe had ended. The city lay in ruins. For the soldiers, victory came with exhaustion rather than celebration. Many had been fighting continuously since 1941. The cost of the war had already been paid in millions of lives. This photograph was taken in 1942 in a village school on Soviet territory. Classes continued even during the war. Lessons were held in destroyed buildings or basements. Many children had lost their parents. school became the only place that still resembled normal life. For millions of children, childhood ended with the war. This image was taken in 1943 on the Eastern Front. Medical personnel worked directly near the battlefield. Many medics were women barely older than the soldiers they treated. They carried the wounded under fire, often without weapons. Thousands of medics died saving others. This photograph was taken in 1942 on occupied Soviet territory. Public executions were used as a method of intimidation. The gallows were often left standing for days. Civilians were forced to watch. Resistance was punished publicly. Fear became a weapon of occupation. This image was taken in 1945 as civilians fled advancing front lines. Millions of German civilians became refugees. Cities collapsed. Food was scarce. War returned to those who had once supported it. The civilian cost did not end with surrender. This photograph was taken after the war ended in 1945. Many soldiers returned to places that no longer existed. Homes were gone. Families were missing. Victory did not mean a return to the past. It marked the beginning of a different struggle. This photograph was taken in the spring of 1944 in Western Europe, shortly after liberation. Civilians did not celebrate immediately. Many had lived under occupation for years. Trust came slowly. Fear did not disappear with the first Allied soldier. Liberation was a process, not a single moment. Taken in France in 1944, this image shows the aftermath of liberation. Suspected collaborators were publicly punished. Some were guilty, others were accused without proof. Justice and revenge often blurred together. The war did not end cleanly. This photograph was taken in 1945 during a war crimes investigation. Mass graves were discovered across liberated territories. Investigators documented evidence carefully. Many crimes had no surviving witnesses. The dead became the only testimony. This image comes from the Nuremberg trials held in 1945 and 1946. For the first time, leaders of a defeated state were tried for crimes against humanity. The world watched closely. The trials set a precedent. War would no longer erase responsibility. This photograph was taken years after the war. Memorials appeared across cities and villages. Names replaced faces. For many families, there was no grave. Only memory remained. This photograph was taken in Europe in 1945, shortly after the war ended. Millions of children were left without parents. Entire families had disappeared. Orphanages were overwhelmed. Many children lived on the streets for years. For them, the war did not end in 1945. This image dates to the late 1940s in the Soviet Union. Many burial sites remained unmarked for years. Families searched without answers. Children often became the only visitors. They remembered when others could not. Memory passed to the next generation. This photograph was taken in Germany after the war. Former soldiers returned to civilian life carrying the weight of defeat. Many worked clearing ruins of cities they once defended. There were no parades, only silence and rebuilding. The war followed them home. This image was taken in the early 1950s. These children were born during or just after the war. They grew up surrounded by ruins and silence. Their parents rarely spoke about the past, but the war shaped their lives anyway. History lived quietly in their homes. This photograph was taken decades after the war. Those who survived carried their memories in silence. Many never spoke of what they saw. Time passed, but the war remained. Not in photographs, but in people. This photograph was taken in 1943 during the mass evacuation inside the Soviet Union. Millions of civilians were transported away from the front. Entire factories, families, and hospitals were moved east. Evacuation saved lives, but separated families for years. Many never returned home. This image dates to 1942 in the Soviet rear. With men at the front, women replaced them in factories. They worked long shifts under extreme conditions. Weapons used at the front were often produced by teenage girls and mothers. The war was fought far beyond the battlefield. This photograph was taken in 1944 during the Italian campaign. Field hospitals operated close to combat zones. Doctors often worked without rest. Medical decisions meant life or death within minutes. Not everyone could be saved. This photograph was taken in Kiev in 1941 after German occupation. Occupation authorities ruled through orders and fear. Posters announced curfews, executions, deportations. Daily life was controlled by printed commands. Disobedience often meant death. This image was captured in 1945 after liberation. Some families were reunited after years of separation. Others searched in vain. Joy and grief existed side by side. Peace arrived unevenly. This photograph was taken in 1944 during the Pacific Campaign. Combat against Japan involved island-by-island fighting. Conditions were brutal. Heat, disease, and constant combat drained soldiers physically and mentally. The war extended far beyond Europe. This photograph was taken in Japan in August 1945. The atomic bomb ended the war in the Pacific, but it introduced a new form of destruction. Civilians suffered immediate and long-term consequences. The world entered the nuclear age. This image shows a displaced persons camp in 1945. Millions had no country to return to. Borders had changed. Life was reduced to waiting for papers, food, and answers. This photograph was taken after the war during ongoing investigations. Not all crimes were judged at Nuremberg. Many cases took decades. Justice was slow. Some perpetrators were never punished. This photograph was taken years after the war. Survivors gathered to remember those who did not return. Time passed, but absence remained. The war ended on paper, not in memory. Winter 1942. Occupied Soviet territory. After partisan activity, German units carried out punitive operations. Entire villages were destroyed. Civilians, women, children, the elderly, were executed or burned alive in their homes. These actions were not accidents. They were part of an official policy of terror. 1943 Eastern Front. Civilians were routinely detained during occupation sweeps. Many were deported for forced labor to Germany. Families were separated within minutes. Most never saw each other again. 1944 year Majdanek concentration camp. This is not a warehouse. These are the belongings of murdered prisoners. Shoes, glasses, suitcases, preserved as evidence. Each object belonged to a person. 1945 year Germany. Local civilians were forced to confront the results of the camps. Many claimed ignorance, but the camps existed for years, and smoke was visible. 1945 to 1946, Nuremberg. For the first time in history, war crimes were judged internationally. The defense claimed they were just following orders. The court rejected this. Responsibility became personal. Leningrad. Winter 1941 to 1942. The siege lasted 872 days. More than 1 million civilians died, most from hunger. Bodies were transported on sleds because there was no strength left to carry them. Stalingrad, February 1943. The city no longer existed. Neither did entire divisions. The battle marked a turning point of the war, at a cost measured in hundreds of thousands of lives. January 1945. Auschwitz. The camp was liberated by the Red Army. Over 1 million people were murdered here. Survivors weighed less than children. Many died after liberation. Warsaw. Autumn 1944. After the uprising, the city was systematically destroyed, block by block. More than 85% of Warsaw was erased. Survival became an act of defiance. Germany. 1945. The war ended, but hunger did not. millions of civilians faced famine, homelessness, and disease. Victory did not mean relief for everyone. Late 1940s, children grew up among ruins. War shaped their childhood before memory formed. For them, destruction was normal. Peace had to be learned. 1946, soldiers returned home, but many could not return to normal life. The war stayed with them, silently. Years after the war, many victims were buried without names. Graves were marked later. Memory became the only justice for many, and sometimes the only record. Decades later, archives revealed what silence tried to hide. Orders, reports, signatures. History spoke through paper. And it did not forget. World War II officially ended in 1945. But its consequences remain. In families, in cities, in memory. These photographs are not history. They are evidence. In 1943, this soldier was officially declared dead. His family received a death notice, his name was engraved on a memorial, and his belongings were sent home. But he did not die. Captured on the Eastern Front, he spent 7 years in a Soviet labor camp. When he finally returned home in 1950, the state refused to recognize him. According to official records, he no longer existed. During World War II, thousands of children were used as spies. They were small, fast, and often ignored by soldiers. Children crossed checkpoints, memorized troop movements, and carried messages hidden in clothing. Most of them never reached adulthood. Many died before their 15th birthday. This was not a real city. During World War II, entire fake towns were built to deceive enemy bombers. Wooden houses, painted streets, and artificial lights redirected air raids away from real populations. Many pilots never realized they were bombing nothing. Some soldiers went to war without carrying a weapon. They refused to kill for religious reasons. Instead, they ran into gunfire to save others. Many received the highest military honors for bravery, without ever firing a shot. In occupied territories, some photographs were punishable by death. Capturing the wrong moment meant execution. Many photographers died for images the world would later rely on as proof. This letter was written hours before death. It was delivered more than 20 years later. For the family, time stopped twice. She stood in the road with her children. The tank stopped. No order was given. They simply did not advance. Some doctors treated wounded enemies. They knew it could cost them their lives, but they believed humanity did not end at the front line. One photograph changed a bombing route. The city survived. Most people never knew how close destruction came. This photo was taken one day before liberation. They did not know the war was ending. For them, hope arrived quietly. In December 1980, a 19-year-old woman collapsed in sub-zero temperatures and lay frozen in the snow for hours. At the hospital, her body was stiff, no detectable pulse, no normal breathing. Then, after slow warming, her heart returned. Days later, she walked out alive, leaving doctors stunned, and the case still debated. These tanks were made of air. During World War II, entire fake armies were built to mislead enemy razvedka. Decoy vehicles, decoy camps, even fake radio traffic. The goal was simple: make the enemy bomb the wrong place and move troops the wrong way. Sometimes, the deception saved thousands of lives without a single shot. Not every battle was fought with weapons. In 1942, many families survived on ration books, measuring sugar by grams and stretching meals for weeks. A single handwritten recipe could mean the difference between hunger and endurance. This is what war looked like away from the front: quiet, repetitive, and relentless. Before every night raid, routes were drawn by hand. A single pencil mark could mean life or death for a crew in the air and civilians on the ground. Some officers quietly adjusted targets to avoid hospitals, schools, and Jalil Kortali. Those tiny circles could save a city. Forged papers were a weapon. A convincing stamp, the right ink, and the correct spelling could open a gate or close a life forever. Some resistance groups became experts in copying official seals, risking execution for every sheet. This pass bought only minutes. But minutes were everything. Sometimes the most dangerous act was simply to stay human. In cities under Postoyani Naluri, musicians played in the open, between ruins and sirens. For a few minutes, people remembered who they were before war tried to erase them. Not victory, just dignity. These tape crosses weren't decoration. They were meant to hold shattered glass together when blast waves hit. In blackout cities, people slept in darkness, listening for engines overhead. War entered homes not through doors, but through windows. Information traveled in the smallest places. A hidden pocket could carry a map, a name list, a coded message, enough to save a unit or doom a family. Couriers stitched these compartments by hand, knowing one search at a checkpoint could end everything. War was fought with needles too. Many goodbyes were not dramatic. They were quiet because panic wasted seconds. On platforms like this, people said, "See you soon," even when they felt it was a lie. For countless families, this was the last time hands ever touched. Dogs were trained to detect mines long before modern sensors existed. Many saved entire units by stopping just seconds before an explosion. They never knew what war was, only trust, commands, and danger. Thousands never returned. When armies moved through villages, schools were often the first places to close. Lessons ended overnight. Many children never returned, not because the war ended, but because they were gone. Most graves had no names. Sometimes there was no paper, no time, no witnesses. Only a helmet, a cross, and a memory that would fade faster than the wood. With so many men at the front, women rebuilt cities overnight. They cleared streets, repaired homes, and returned to work before the next siren. War changed who held the tools. Stealing bread was a crime punishable by prison, or worse. But hunger ignored laws. For many children, survival began with theft. Illegal newspapers kept hope alive. Every page risked execution, but words traveled faster than fear. Millions of children were evacuated alone. Some never saw their parents again. War separated families with paperwork and whistles. Many letters were written, knowing they might never be sent. Still soldiers wrote, because words were the only thing that could cross the front line. Factories never slept. Night shifts fed the front lines with shells, planes, and parts. Victory was built one shift at a time. Liberation did not feel like victory. It felt like survival. Only later did people realize the war was finally over. Wedding rings were often confiscated first. They were easy to melt, easy to catalog, easy to forget. For many couples, this was the last shared possession they ever lost together. This tag replaced identity. If the child got lost, this was all the world knew about them. Some tags were never reunited with families. War didn't only destroy cities, it erased knowledge. Some books burned here were never rewritten. Hospitals were not safe zones. Doctors learned to treat wounds while the building still shook. Survival often depended on speed, not skill. Shoes outlived their owners. They were counted, stacked, and archived. For many families, this was all that remained. One lever could redirect hundreds of lives. Railway workers were rarely remembered, but their decisions mattered. Not every story had witnesses. Some moments remained unanswered forever. Civilians invented their own signals. Anything that might bring help or warn others was worth trying. Crossed out names meant confirmation. No speeches, no ceremonies. Just ink replacing lives. When the war ended, there was no sound, no cheers, no music. Just silence. And the realization that nothing would ever be the same. This man was never counted. His number was missing from the list. When the camp was liberated, no one noticed he was gone. Officially, he never existed. This helmet was found after the battle. No body nearby. No name inside. Some soldiers simply vanished. This train left the station. It never arrived. Years later, the tracks ended in forest. No records followed. She altered medical records, not to hide death, but to save lives. One line of ink meant survival. The camera clicked. Seconds too late. Everything had already happened. Only silence remained. No one knew his name. No papers. No family. Only the war remembered him. He did not turn toward the camera. Some moments were never meant to be recorded. There were no names here. Only numbers. Most were never identified. The camera survived. The photographer did not. The film was developed years later.